Welcome to Creation Sabbath, a how-to guide. I'm Tim Standish, and I hope that many of those who are watching this particular presentation will already have experienced Creation Sabbath. And yet I also hope that there are a few surprises in this particular presentation. One of the things that I love about our creationsabbath.net website is that there is an opportunity there for people who have better ideas than I do to share what they did for Creation Sabbath so that other churches and institutions can get ideas from that. So this is just a beginning, but I hope that it's an enjoyable and useful beginning. First of all, what is Creation Sabbath? Well, Creation Sabbath is both different and the same. What do I mean by that? Creation Sabbath was started really by our Creator and Redeemer, Jesus Christ. During those first 6 days of creation, he was making the earth, he was creating life on it, he made Adam and Eve, he put a garden there for them to live in, and then the second sacrament that he instituted after marriage on day 6 was the Sabbath, so that we could take time to be with him, rest, and remember that we are created beings. So you could argue that Creation Sabbath was started thousands of years ago, or you could argue, well, it's something that the General Conference Ministerial Association came up with just a few years ago. Creation Sabbath is both old and new, and I hope that every Creation Sabbath for you is something new and enjoyable. I want to draw your attention before I move on to our website again, creationsabbath.net, because there are a lot of resources there that are available. I hope that as you develop interesting and new things, you will share them with us, and we'll share those with the world on creationsabbath.net. When is Creation Sabbath? It is the fourth Sabbath of every October. So you never have to wonder about when it is. Why is it the fourth Sabbath? I wish I could give you a truthful answer about that, but it falls around October 22, sometimes actually on October 22. I'm hoping that October 22 or the Sabbath closest to that, during which we celebrate Creation Sabbath, is the antidote to the great disappointment of 1844. This is a time of joy and celebration for us. Last year, people registered their celebrations on our website, creationsabbath.net. And here you can see a map of where all of the churches and other institutions that registered are located. You can see that there are some areas where people are very enthusiastic about registering their events. Why do we want you to do that? Well, part of it is so that we know where things are happening. And part of it is so that you know. Let's say that you live in, well, let's say Sydney, Australia, where I was born, and you want to know, where is there a church that's going to be doing something fabulous for Creation Sabbath this year? If you go to the website, you'll be able to find one if that church has registered their event with us. So there are lots of reasons for registering your event. When churches or schools or hospitals or other institutions register an event, we usually make some special resource available for that, and we're certainly going to do the same thing this year. I'm going to go through a number of different words that will help us understand and plan for Creation Sabbath. The first of those words is celebration. And I'm Professor Smarty Pants. I say we have a debate, and yes, this is an opportunity for me to show how much smarter I am than everybody else. This is what we need for Creation Sabbath. What a brilliant idea. Let's see here. We'll need experts on both sides and maybe three sides. Yes, and they'll all be arguing with each other. Creation Sabbath is not an opportunity to have yet another debate in our churches. Creation Sabbath is a time of rest from that. So, Dr. Smarty Pants, talking about, who wants to turn everything into a debate to show that we're smarter or he or she is smarter than everybody else. No, we should probably choose to reply as our Creator and Redeemer did with the words, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Creation Sabbath is a celebration. Rule number one, as you plan your Creation Sabbath event, is no debates. Just don't do that. We are Bible-believing Christians. The creation is not a debate among us. It is a debate that we may have with the world. Creation Sabbath is not the time for that. God created the Sabbath for man, not for debates. I might be paraphrasing somewhat loosely there, Mark 2:27, but you get my point. I want you to consider the fourth commandment. Usually we talk about the fourth commandment as it is laid out in Exodus 20. But here it is repeated again in Exodus 31, and I particularly like the way that it's stated here. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, work. Debating is work. What does God say should be done with those who are going to be doing work on the Sabbath day? It says, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore, the children of Israel, and remember, we are spiritual Israel through Jesus Christ, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. So it's not something that was nailed to the cross. This is a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. And what's it a sign of? For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. So it's a sign. By keeping the Sabbath, we are signaling. Who are we signaling to? Maybe it's to ourselves, maybe it's to each other, but ultimately it is to our communities that we worship the Creator God, not some false God, not some idol, not some caricature of God. We worship the Creator of all things. And this is a joyful, joyful thing. Now, these are two beautiful women who I happen to know. On the left is the most beautiful mother-in-law that I have. And the lady on the right is Mrs. Zachary. She and her husband were missionaries where I grew up, and I knew them in Singapore. Look at the joy that just sort of exudes from these women. And by the way, look at those shirts that they're wearing. Those are Creation Sabbath shirts from last year. Every year we try to come up with something fun, and that was a particularly good one. It was supposed to be for the General Conference session, but hey, that didn't happen. Doesn't matter. Creation Sabbath can be celebrated in years when there is a General Conference and years when there isn't a General Conference. Creation Sabbath is a time for reflection. It's a time for us to think, who am I? We might spend time on the Sabbath talking about various theological things, but the creation is very practical. We are created beings in a created world, created by a God who loves us. We were created in the image of God. How do we relate to others? Very important. They also are created in the image of God. How do we relate to the rest of the creation? That's an important one nowadays, as we do things that negatively impact the world that God made for us. And how do we relate to God, our Creator, obviously? How do we relate to Him? Sometimes it's important for us to stop and remind ourselves of what the Bible tells us about this, but also about what God's second book, His creation, tells us in terms of answers to these questions as well. Are we fearfully and wonderfully made? I can assure you that we are. Is God's love evident in His creation? It certainly is. As long as we have air to breathe, as long as we have food to eat, all of these blessings that God literally rains down on us tell us that God is love, even in this world that is imperfect. You're probably wondering about this symbol that we use for Creation Sabbath. I'm going to tell you a few things about it as we go along. We started out with a perfect geometric form. That perfect form is a circle. And I love circles because they have an infinite number of sides. In a way, that reminds me of the fact that God is infinite and we are finite. But you'll notice that it is a broken circle that we use. This is a reminder that while God created our world very good, it's broken. And we need to keep that in mind. It's not perfect. It's still pretty good, however. I'm a biologist, so I study the creation, and it is amazing. But the Bible reminds us, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. As we think about who we are and how we relate to everybody else, we are not perfect. God is. The creation is not perfect. It is broken. Doesn't mean it's not great, but it is broken. We may be broken creatures, but there are these facts about humanity that unite us. And this is one reason why Creation Sabbath is for your community, not just for you. Without wanting to be too prescriptive about things, if you're a pastor who is thinking, all right, Creation Sabbath is coming up, I'd better find a creation sermon and preach it. All right, that'll be job done. No. Our churches are lights in the communities where they're found. And Creation Sabbath is an opportunity for us to serve those communities. You'll remember that we as Seventh-day Adventists recognize the three angels' messages as being central to our mission. And I want us to read the first angel's message because I don't know, I find it really the most exciting, if I'm allowed to say that. This is the everlasting gospel. So If we're ever confused about what we're supposed to be doing, well, this everlasting gospel is the one that we're supposed to be sharing with our community. So let's read this text. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. Not just to ourselves, not just to our own people, the communities where we live, our neighbors, the people who we like, and the people we're not so keen on. And what is it that we're supposed to be saying with a loud voice? Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. Don't stop reading there, okay? I mean, imagine telling somebody you're going to be judged and not telling them what they should do. That's sort of like asking somebody who's blindfolded to kick a goal in football. There's something we should be doing, and it is worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. If we're wondering on a practical level, what should I do? God's hour of judgment is upon me. The thing to do is to worship him who is our Creator and our Redeemer. Let's talk a little bit more about this symbol that we use for Creation Sabbath. You'll notice that it looks a little bit like a C. And that was intentional because C, at least in English, is the first letter of Christ. You'll remember that John tells us that it was Jesus Christ, the Word, the living Word, who made all things. All things were made through him. And without him, nothing was made that was made. So Jesus Christ, that's why he is our Creator and our Redeemer. By the way, it's kind of nice that he's our Creator because when he promises a new creation, we know that he's quite capable of doing that. There are some other words that I want you to think about. See also goes with creation. And the fact that God is Creator is what is presented to us in the Bible as the reason why we should worship him. You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. Church also begins with C. And there are messages given in the book of Revelation to different churches. You've probably heard that there are many of us who suspect that message, that special message to the church of Laodicea, is the one that is directed to us. Look at what it says. And to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things says the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. Who is this describing? It's Jesus again. And Jesus has a special message for us. It's a little bit of a worrying one if we're talking about the church of Laodicea, because he's not pleased. We're too content. We need to be out there. We need to find our first love again. We need to share the truth about the God whom we worship. I believe that reminding ourselves about the creation is step one in overcoming our Laodicean state. One more word, community. We've already mentioned this. The disciples were told, and we are, as Christians, disciples of Jesus Christ, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. We cannot ignore these communities in which we live. Activity should be a characteristic of Creation Sabbath. Do something. By that I mean move, go out into nature, do something. Don't just sit there in church. If some activity involving nature isn't already part of your church's regular Sabbath activities, take advantage of Creation Sabbath. Go for a walk. Even in a city, there's still air to breathe, plants that grow, birds that fly, buildings constructed with interesting rocks, and any number of other wonderful things. But obviously, if you can get outside of your normal urban activities, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. If you can't do that, bring something into your church. Where I live in Loma Linda, the Loma Linda University Church sometimes does these amazing nature vespers. They are very popular with young people and the community. And you can imagine why. Sometimes they have snakes. Sometimes they have, well, they've even brought a lion into the church. Now, I'm not recommending, do not bring poisonous snakes into your church unless you have people who really know what they're doing. Probably a bad idea unless you know what you're really doing to bring a lion into your church. But you know what? I've seen the most amazing things done by churches around the world. I'm going to concentrate, and I'm actually going to show you a few pictures that I've gotten from churches in Nigeria. One of the most brilliant things I saw done there was a church that contacted somebody in their community, not another Seventh-day Adventist, and asked them to bring their collection of interesting plants to church. And they really were interesting. This is a great example of people thinking outside the box. Here is a photograph of our brothers and sisters in Nigeria. They happen to go to the beach for Creation Sabbath. Does it look like there's anybody there who isn't celebrating Creation Sabbath? Everybody's there. Look at that. Old and young, men and women. It's beautiful to see this. This is what Christianity does for us. This is what understanding that we are all God's children because we are all created beings made in His image. Let's talk about team, because you are not alone. It can be overwhelming sometimes to be told, hey, do a special program at your church or at your school or your hospital or whatever institution it is that you're associated with. Don't feel like you have to do it yourself. Obviously, you have the Holy Spirit with you if you pray, but every institution has people with diverse experiences and talents. And I was just thinking of some of them. Artists, musicians, painters, writers, gardeners. Every church seems to have several of these amazingly creative people. As I got my PhD in biology, I was trained constantly not to see the beautiful design in nature. It's hard to miss it, but in a secular institution, you are taught this is not designed. This was not created. This is a product of a mindless process, and that can be very discouraging. But you know what? Artists know what creativity is. They're in a much better position in some ways to talk about the creation than I am. But please don't forget scientists. If you've got scientists in your church who love God and believe the Bible, take advantage of them as well. Adventist churches commonly have technicians of various kinds, engineers, builders. Don't forget that Jesus Christ himself talked actually a fair amount about the creation, and he was a carpenter. use them to explain what creativity is, what goes into making something, so that we can appreciate, to some degree at least, what God put into making you and me and bees and horses and grass and all of those other amazing things that are out there. And then, of course, Adventist churches, we're known for having medical professionals. Every nurse, every doctor, every dentist, all of those people have studied anatomy, physiology. They know all sorts of things that they can tell us about how fearfully and wonderfully made we are. If you've got a vet in your church, hey, invite them to tell you something about these amazing creatures that they have the privilege of working with. And of course, there are educators. The creation is central to Adventist education. It is a means of introducing students to their Creator and Redeemer. All of these people, if they're in your church, they are part of your team for Creation Sabbath. You can probably think of other people. Let's not forget, obviously, pastors have extensive training. What about mothers? Don't mothers know more about creation than pretty much all of us? They've had that intimate experience of giving birth to a child. It's incredible, the depth of experience and talent that every church, every institution has to draw on as we plan our Creation Sabbath activities. Don't leave people out. Draw them in. Here's an example that I just want to show you. This is a poster that was made for a big Creation Sabbath celebration last year in Bolivia. And look at this. Up at the top, they've put the logos of various organizations that were involved in making that program possible. You'll notice the Geoscience Research Institute there. These institutions that our church has are here to support you as part of your Creation Sabbath team. Imagination is really important. Remember, creation and creativity go hand in hand. Don't think that there are rules that constrain what can be done, except, of course, for rule number 1, no debating. Think outside the box. If you want to do something different than your normal service, go for it. Do something different than normal. Think outside the box. Get some of those creative people in your church involved. Sing a new song. I'm serious. There are so many amazing songs out there about the creation. I don't know if any of you watched Prince Philip's funeral, but if you did, you heard a magnificent new rendition of Psalm 104. Nobody has to die in your church, and you don't have to be the husband of Queen Elizabeth II to enjoy this music in your church. It is beautiful. It is biblical. Go out there and find something amazing and new, because I can guarantee you that it is there. Compose a new song. If there's a musician who is in your church and has that talent, do it. Compose a new song and then share it. You could inaugurate a new work of art for the church. And it doesn't have to be something necessarily big, but think about what can be done. Use your imagination. Use the imagination of those on your Creation Sabbath team. Why did we make the Creation Sabbath symbol on its side? Because if you like symmetry, as I do, we probably have done it up this way. Obviously, we've already mentioned, yes, it kind of looks a little bit like a C. So it stands for Christ and creation and community and so on. But there's something really fun and deep with this. If we were symbolizing when days break, when the transition from one day to another is, it's at sundown. And that break that we put in that circle also symbolizes sundown. You'll remember that God called the light day and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. The day begins in the evening as we go through the days of creation. And the Sabbath begins in the evening at sundown. So we were kind of really excited to put that into this very simple but profound symbol. Outside. Think about what God did. Then the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. You'll remember that it was in that garden that God came to meet with Adam and Eve. Our place is not inside buildings all the time. If God put us in a garden, on Creation Sabbath, we can enjoy the garden that he created for us. Go outside at some point. If you don't want to do an outside church service, which I always encourage people to do, take the opportunity to go outside at some other point during the Sabbath day. If at all possible, worship in the cathedral God created for us to meet with him. Here we read in this prelude to the feeding of the 5,000. Then he took them, that's his disciples, and went aside privately into a deserted place belonging to the city called Bethsaida. But when the multitudes knew it, they followed him, and he received them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who had need of healing. We think about that healing in terms of physical needs. But you know what? There are mental and spiritual needs that all of us have. And those are better met outside, in the fresh air, looking at the beauty that God created, than they are inside four walls, where all we see is a very limited view of what God made. Here are those Nigerians. This is a Sabbath school class on Creation Sabbath, and you can see they chose to do their Sabbath school outside. What a fabulous idea. So I didn't think of this. I'll give 100% credit to those genius Nigerians. Now is the time to begin your plan for Creation Sabbath. Identify the talent with which God has blessed your group. Make Creation Sabbath a new beginning, personally and corporately. Once you have your plans sketched out, not when you have your plans completely formed, just when you have the general idea, then start thinking about what opportunities are there to share the beauty of creation with your neighbors. Bring the outside in and take the congregation out. Keep it fresh. Not a complicated, scientific, logical argument necessarily, not some dry theological exposition. Make it real and enjoy it. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you've made them all. The earth is full of your possessions. That's the response that we want to get to Creation Sabbath. One other thing that you may or may not have noticed about the Creation Sabbath symbol is the empty space inside it. Can you see how that's in the shape of a magnifying glass? That was intentionally done. We wanted to emphasize that this is one of those places where faith and science go together. Creation Sabbath is an opportunity to discover something new. As you plan now for Creation Sabbath, be looking for something new, something that everybody hasn't heard before. So let's do it. Let's make Creation Sabbath a celebration, a time of reflection. Let's make it for everyone. Let's make it active. Form a team. Draw on the imagination of people whom we know. And let's take it outside and start now as we prepare for Creation Sabbath. You might have noticed that these words were not completely randomly chosen. They happen to form the word creation if you just take the first letters of them. Thank you so much for being part of Creation Sabbath. Don't forget to visit creationsabbath.net if you're looking for more resources and ideas. God bless you as you plan a spectacular Creation Sabbath for your church and for your community.